This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Rashani from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
I would like to acknowledge that the Militantly Mixed podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Chumash and the Tongva people, and I wish to pay my respects to the people of those nations, both past and present. Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Charmaine, aka Mixed Girl Maine, the busiest mixed race, bisexual, polyamorous, atheist, comic book nerd, cat mom, mask making, Gulf Coast Cosmos comic book co-owning, Asian American Podcasters Association Golden Crane Award winning podcaster. I did it in one breath. In this podcasting game. This is episode supposed to be 122, but I'm going to call this 122B because it is, I guess, a part 2 to last week's episode. Last week I dropped a rerun of episode 22, which was recorded in December of 2018 with cousin Jesse Daner, a mixed Mexican black biracial man who was transracially adopted by a white family. He also has an adopted brother who is black as well, but predominantly they grew up in a white family. And we got to talking 2 years ago about both his transracial identity, his biracial identity, and what life has been like growing up with a white family and having all these questions about where he came from. At the time we met in 2018, he had just found a half-sibling, a biological half-sibling on Ancestry.com, and I believe they had just met and were starting to build a relationship. Over the last 2 years, Jesse and I have been in contact, and I kind of know what's been going on with him, but we wanted to bring him back to share that with all of y'all. So if you listened to last week's episode, which was a rerun from 2018, that was when Jesse was just at basically the early stages of meeting his biological relatives. And I'm intentionally saying relatives versus family because the family that is his adopted family, the ones who raised him from birth. So a lot has happened in 2 years. And actually, I can't even believe it's been 2 years because it didn't feel that long ago for either one of us. But 100 episodes separate the first time we heard from Jesse and now, episode 122. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. He and I spoke for about 2.5 hours back in December, of course, because I talk too much and I think he likes to talk too. So we just kept going. But I'm only sharing about an hour of that discussion with y'all. That updates what we talked about. You will hear a little bit of audio issues in this recording. I think this is a big product of podcasting from home during COVID. It's something my husband and I deal with, trying to figure out a schedule that allows him to be super quiet so that I can do what I got to do. But that's also hard to expect of guests as well, because if you're sheltering in place with somebody, to tell them, hey, don't talk for an hour is kind of tough. And especially since Jesse and I went on for about 2.5 hours, there'll be times that you can hear kitchen sounds in the back, or like the furniture moving and things like that. I think that was actually my upstairs neighbors because I've been fighting that guy for 5 years now. So I just tell you that because it does pop up a few times. A couple times there's a high-pitched little squeak in the background, which I cannot clean up, and it's driving me crazy. You probably won't hear it unless I just pointed it out to you by saying that. But I always like to tell you when I have a little bit of audio problems because it's obviously not my intention to put out something with background noise or anything like that. But there was some in this episode. All right. Before we jump into our remix with Jesse, I do have a few things that I want to share. The first thing is I was a guest a couple weeks ago. I was interviewed by Kim Noonan, the host of the Multiracial White Boy podcast. I have talked about it, but I think that episode's about to drop this coming week. And he dropped a video clip of our discussion on his Instagram page. So I'm just encouraging you to follow him on Instagram at multiracial_whiteboy. Just like me, he's a mixed race person who's out here trying to have conversations with a bunch of mixed race people, either from different perspectives of like career or life or whatever. And in Kim's case in particular, he is a biracial, transracial adoptee, I guess kind of too. He was adopted from Vietnam during the Vietnam War. He is the product of a Vietnamese woman and a white American soldier. He doesn't know who he is or anything, but he was adopted by a white family and raised by a white family here in the U.S. And so we talked a lot about both his and my identity and access to our Asianness, in addition to the fact that he grew up around white people. And for me, I grew up around black people. So it was a really interesting conversation. When that episode drops, I do hope that you listen to it. He's on all of the podcatchers just like me, but I encourage you to follow a fellow cousin out there on these mixed race podcasting streets, because it just gives us more access. The more people telling our stories, the more people sharing our narratives, the better it is for us. I really hope that, we all get to support each other through this medium, and I appreciate it. Kim is going to be on Militantly Mixed in the next coming month or two. I'm still catching up on interviews that I have already recorded that I need to release, but then I'm going to start recording again with new people in February to drop for March. So you'll hear from him on this show soon, but if you want to get to know him a little bit before that, go check out The Multiracial White Boy. All right, and I'm sure our international audience is tired of hearing about American politics. I promise you that those of us who live in America are tired of it too. But we did have a pretty significant change last week. Our new President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris were inaugurated on Wednesday, and we officially don't have to deal too much more, I think, in the future with Asterisk 45. Not to get too much into the politics, but I'm sure it's pretty obvious from my show that I do lean to the left. And while I do have complicated feelings about both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they were the party that made the most sense for me as a person of color, as a queer person, to vote for. So and more than anything, I'm just fucking relieved that I don't have to deal with Asterisk 45 in that office anymore. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next month or so as they deal with the second impeachment, but a sigh of relief is finally being breathed over here, at least in my household. I'm in 50% of this country's households. But we're pretty polarized at the moment. I do want to talk a little bit, though, about the significance of Kamala Harris being the vice president of the United States. She is the first woman vice president that we've ever had. She is the second person of color vice president that we ever had. The first one was Charles Curtis, I think his name was. He was the VP for Herbert Hoover, and he was an indigenous person. So we have had a person of color as a VP before, but it's been ages, and he was a man. So with Kamala, we're hitting a lot of historical landmarks with her ascendancy to the vice presidency. And let me just put a parentheses. It is ridiculous that we're just having our first woman at all in one of the two highest seats. It is also ridiculous that we don't often have more people of color represented in higher political seats. Close parentheses. Other countries do it all the time. It's driving me crazy. But for some reason, it took us till now. I do hope that this opens the door for future to make it a little bit easier. But as we saw, even after Barack Obama's candidacy, it's not like it just opened the floodgates or anything like that. There's still a lot of work to be done. But it is pretty significant to watch someone who looks like we could be related, at least looks like my family members, if not looking like me, also identifying as a Black and Asian woman. I'm East Asian, she's South Asian, but we have a very similar identity. We grew up in very similar cities. Hers is Oakland, mine is Long Beach. And I was actually wanting to go down the path of becoming a lawyer. I wanted to do social justice law when I was younger. I was dissuaded by my family because we were poor, and there was probably a lot of belief that it would be protecting me by not having me try versus me being rejected or it not working because we couldn't afford it. So I do believe my family had the best intentions when they dissuaded me from practicing, but it has always been a point of regret for me that I didn't try. And now that I see someone like Kamala, who comes from a very similar city to me, who is mixed very similarly to me, who has ascended a seat like that, it does make me wonder, what would my life have been like had I gone down that path? So there's like a weirdly personal connection to me seeing her up on that seat that makes it emotional. That being said, I've talked about it on other podcasts. I do have complicated feelings with her as a Californian, because of some of the work that was done while she was here in this state. I do think there's been some progress, but, this kind of stuff you can't forget that this stuff happened in the past, and there's a lot of problems related to her decisions regarding mass incarceration and imprisoning of innocent people, of known innocent people, while she was in this state. So I won't deal with the politics of it. Right now, I'll just at least talk about the impact of the racial identity and the gender identity that she has in that seat. Something that happened to me last week was I got to watch the inauguration of the first mixed race woman vice president, and then 2 minutes later, just a few minutes later, I was sitting on a Zoom call with the Seattle Academy Mixed Race Student Affinity Group. I was invited by one of their founding members, Jasmine, who is a freshman at that high school. And I came on to their weekly Zoom call, kind of like half speaking, half Q&A type of thing. And I talked about it on Instagram last week. So if you saw that video, I did cry on it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I cry all the time now. But I said that experience would have been emotional for me any day that I was ever going to be invited to a mixed race affinity group for high school kids. I was going to be emotional by the impact of that. But because I jumped on that call minutes after watching the inauguration, where I got to see the first mixed race Black Asian woman be inaugurated, become our vice president, and some of the kids that were on the call shared her mix, or they shared my mix, or they were mixed different ways, but they still felt the impact of her. We didn't really talk about the inauguration. We noted it at the beginning of the call. The rest of the call was mostly about their organization and me, but it wasn't lost on me that these kids that are just in the precipice of trying to figure out who they're going to be as adults, who are actively investigating their mixed race identity in high school and openly talking about it with their classmates and their teachers, to see them on the day that I got to see her in that seat, it just gave me a lot of hope that this generation is going to be able to feel more comfortable aspiring to higher things than even my generation did. Like, even though I was actively and openly mixed as a high school student, I wasn't surrounded by other people who could talk about this. And it's nice to see that there is space for them now. And I really, really hope other schools are doing this. I am going to be speaking at another high school in February. And of course, if you watch our live streams that we do once a month, third Thursday of every month, this last Thursday, we did a live stream talking about mixed race affinity groups at university level, where I was joined by Jay and Dakota, who you've met before. Jay was the founding member of the Mixed Race Student Coalition at UVA, University of Virginia, and Dakota is one of the directors at the Mixed Student Union at UCLA. And then we were also joined by Phoebe, who you haven't met yet on the show, but you will get to know her a little bit more in the coming months. Phoebe is a director of retention and recruitment at Mixed at Berkeley, so UC Berkeley. We had a panel discussion about both the importance of the mixed race student organizations on on university campuses, but also just like their personal interactions and the importance of it to them. I know for me, I'm really encouraged by seeing the fact that the younger generation is able to do that now. And I'm a little bit jealous, but only in a positive way, in which I'm just excited and I want them to do more. So we got that panel together. I actually planned it back in December. So it was just kind of weird timing that 2 high schools have since asked me to speak to them as well. It was just really affirming to watch them already trying to tackle these issues in their lives right now, when in my generation, which wasn't long ago, I was a teenager 25 years ago, 23 years ago, somewhere around there. So not super duper long ago, but it was still enough that we didn't openly talk about it publicly. So I was overwhelmed emotionally and amazed. It was kind of a crazy day, Wednesday, to have both of those experiences happen. But I don't want to make this too long. We're already kind of crossing over into too long. My last thing is I do just want to shout out a couple of the new Patreon sponsors. The last time you heard from me, I was actually pretty frightened I wasn't going to be able to keep the show going up much longer, because we lost a significant amount of Patreon sponsorship December. And I have to admit, it makes me really uncomfortable having to talk about Patreon every week, because when I started the show, I fully intended to self-fund because it was something that I wanted to do for myself. But as the show grew, so did the expenses. And to the 33 people who have sponsored the show or are actively still sponsoring the show. They're the reason why you get this entertainment, if that's what it is for you, or therapy, if that's what it is for you. It's those 33 people that really make it possible, because I have the expenses of producing the show now exceed my ability to support it on my own. And I'm just really, really grateful. I know I named off some names last week, but I wanted to make sure that I caught up from some of the more recent sponsors. So I want to shout out to Ginger, Alejandra, Aaron, Rosa, Brianna, Natalia. Those are the folks that, at least since September to January, have active sponsorship. I also want to shout out Evelyn, who recently increased their sponsorship, and they have been a sponsor since September of 2019. Thank you to all of you. If honestly, without you, I wouldn't be able to continue to produce this show. I mean, whatever free time, quote unquote, free time I have to do the recordings, to do the research, to put the editing together and all that kind of stuff, I can do all those things still. But unfortunately now, the expenses to actually get the file to your ears has increased quite a bit since the listenership has increased. And it's because of those names that I just named that we have this show. And I'm just so grateful for it. If you would also like to sponsor the show, you can go to patreon.com/militantlymix, and you can sponsor as low as $1 to as high as you wish. And Patreon now allows you to choose either a monthly or an annual sponsorship. If you choose annual, I think they give you a 12% discount across the total year's worth of donations. But if you want to do the full amount that you're signing up for, the monthly option is still available. If you want to sponsor the show, but you don't want to do it or can't do it on a regular basis, you just want to drop some tip coins in the tip jar, you can go to paypal.me/militantlymixed. And all of that money from either Patreon or PayPal goes into the ManeHustle Media bank account. It is separate from my bank account. I do not get paid for doing this show yet, but it allows me to keep the show going, even when on the personal side, I'm financially struggling. So it's because of these people. Please thank them also in your horts for providing this entertainment for y'all. All right, I think that is it for today. I do want to hurry up and get to this episode. So without further ado, please join in me in welcoming back our cousin from episode 22, Jesse Daner. You've had a whole journey since, and I know you have, because you and I have exchanged some messages.
Yeah. That's crazy. I didn't think of it like that. That is a long time. So yeah, well, we went from as much as me just meeting her to now, like, she buys me birthday presents and Christmas presents. Like,
wow.
Like, not, and by that I mean just like the just funny how things change, you know. But so yeah, since then, we see each other, I would say, once every couple weeks, maybe once a month. And
she actually does still live relatively close to where you grew up.
So she lives in Chula Vista, and it's like from here, it's like 15 minutes from my house in La Mesa. And yeah, we just saw each other a couple of days ago, actually, and we exchanged Christmas presents. I gave her some stuff that we made. My girlfriend and I here just making random house-made things, and then also some baking. And then she gave me cookies and stuff like that too. So it's been pretty interesting, and I've gotten to know my half siblings, and I see them at the stores on accident, and
oh, that's wild. Because I bet you it makes you wonder how many times you had seen them without knowing that you were related.
Exactly. So it's good though. It's cool. It's been an interesting experience. The issue I foresee now is one day when I get married, having my biological mom and my adoptive mom in the same room. And if, for instance, if the person I marry speaks Spanish, that person, my biological mom, will be able to communicate more with her family and all that stuff like that. And I don't see that as a problem. I just see that as like, okay, like, how do I keep biological mom, in a not a certain place, but like, how do I make my adoptive mom feel,
like hierarchically, because your adopted mom is your mom, exactly. The person who raised you, the person who knows you better, having them have a place of more significance, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
In the hierarchy. Yeah.
And I want to make sure that that's felt by her most of all. And then if my biological mom sees it, then so be it.
Right.
But it's been interesting. It's been a good experience. And
I'll tell you where we left off in terms of the audience, not you and I, because I know a little bit more than because we've talked since then a little bit. But where we left off in the recording, you had just discovered a half sibling, thinking through ancestry, thinking that they were possibly either a first cousin or something. And as you got to talking, you found out they were actually your half sibling. And you were either about to have or just had met them in person. Now that I realize I probably should have re-listened back to that episode so I can be like fresh on it. But so I don't know what we talked about after the fact and what was actually on the recording. By the time I cut this together, I will have re-listened to it though. Yeah. But I know that was at least something that was down the pipe if it hadn't already just happened. And from there, the journey was beginning. Okay. So can you kind of tell us a little bit what happened between meeting your biological half sister and I guess what's happened since?
Well, so since then, I did listen to the episode back when I was on a plane in November. So I'm like roughly, vaguely familiar with it. But since then, I've met my biological sister multiple times, to the point where, I don't know, we're cool. We're cool. You know, it's
Are
good.
You friends?
I wouldn't say friends, but I don't know, we text from time to time, you know?
Okay.
But biological mom and I talk, not like talk, but we'll like just hi, bye, how are you, and stuff like that. But we do that. It's like not quite often, but we do it, you know, bi-monthly maybe. And then we have each other on Facebook and Instagram. So
does it feel like comparing it to other relationships that you have out in the world? I imagine it doesn't really feel like family. No. But do you feel like there is something familial between y'all?
I would say a tad bit. And it's probably just because, I don't know, at times I feel like we're just talking, not superficially, but like like talking about stuff now, not talking about, you know.
Right.
And I guess it's kind of, for her, might be, I don't know if it's difficult to talk about, or she's just more of a person that like, I don't know, she's apparently living, like, you know, her life is very different, you know what I mean, from working in a school right now and being sober for this long to, you know, my time. So no, it's interesting. It's good. It's I would say it's still kind of, it's more than strangers, maybe like, you know, a little bit past friends, but not familiar, not family yet. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's maybe, I'm just still a little hesitant and, you know, try not to be trustworthy of everybody. And, I don't know.
I mean, there, you know, blood is thicker than water as a phrase doesn't work for many of us. You know, even in my family, who most of us don't talk anymore. And a lot of that has to do with just like certain grudges that will never be ungrudged, no matter how much you talk about it. And so it's, in those cases, are healthier to separate those relationships than to keep them just because we happen to be related to them. So in your and that's like people who grew up around each other. In your circumstance, with these people not knowing you, not being there for you, to suddenly just be like, hey, we're going to be best, whatever, like it doesn't probably seem very reasonable. It doesn't necessarily mean you couldn't become closer with time, but the amount of trust, I imagine, that needs to be learned and earned is probably pretty heavy.
Yeah, I need to see, I guess part of me is effort, you know what I'm saying? And I give that to my biological mom, and she definitely does, you know, what seems to be perceived as effort. But, you know, I'm not going to call my half brothers they're my brothers. We do this, because it's, you know, like you said, it has to be earned, has to be worked towards, I think mutually, of course. But no, it's been a cool experience, and I definitely lean more into, and I guess I think about it is that, you know, I do it because I like to do it, but I lean more into like the like, yeah, my biological mom is from this area, this area. I don't know if you can, for instance, say, I can't say I'm Puerto Rican if I was born Puerto Rican and had the same thing, or say, in this case, Mexican.
Sure.
Because I don't think I had the Mexican culture. I didn't have the Mexican culture growing up. You know what I'm saying?
No.
But by
and
race.
You've been learning it pretty much since you've been coming into touch with it.
Yeah, which is another interesting, that thing that kind of makes me like, I've been looking into Afro-Mexican like populations in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go visit those places that have those highest population, because a lot of actually is happening right now for them in Mexico as being accepted, like, into being Mexican. Whereas that's been, I don't know if you've heard, they had like their two roots. It's like indigenous and Spaniard. And then their third root would be escaped slaves. So I don't know. It's been interesting. There's a couple places I want to go. One in Oaxaca, which is, let alone being a darker state, they have one of the highest Afro populations. And I don't know if that's correlated or what, but a place that I want to go that has an interesting story is that one of their slave ships crashed off the coast, and slaves. I
remember you telling me about this.
Yeah. Slaves swam the shore. And so still on my bucket list, still want to go visit. They did the census and they're being recognized on the census, which is interesting, is that I think it was 200,000 or 300,000. Either way, it's an astonishing number. Of people in Mexico claimed, like, I am that. I am Afro. I am mixed with Afro-Latin. Like, so that to me is just like, it's not like they're just pulling these numbers out of thin air. These are people that are actively putting that down. Oh, I can check this box now on the census.
Because it exists. Yeah.
Because it exists. So it's like interesting. And to kind of flip it around, is my mom, my adoptive mom, she's been to Oaxaca like 4 times recently. Like, just because one of our family friends is from there. And interesting thing is I'm sure you'll get a chuckle out of this, is once those people that are in like the Costa Chica, the Afro Mexican areas of Oaxaca, if they leave their area and cops stop them or Border Patrol stops them, they're going to ask them, you look like you're Ecuadorian, you look like you're Guatemalan. Like, no, I'm from here. I'm from Mexico, Oaxaca. They'll ask you, sing the national anthem. And if you ask, like, dude, I don't even think I could do that for our
America, right? I could do part of it. But also, I don't want to sing that song because it's got a whole bunch of slave shit in it.
So that's funny. And then also like,
wow.
In school, like my girlfriend would say, like, a lot, that's like a common insult. Like, if you're dark, people are like, oh, you're probably Oaxacan.
Oh, really?
So that's and even my family friend who's from Oaxaca, her husband, she's dark, and she's just like, that was just the whiteness thing it's everywhere. And I accept that. It's everywhere. But like, and I don't know enough about it to say it, to dive into it, but I encourage people that are listening to like look into other countries like ours. Is our history with African Americans is interesting, but Mexico has one interesting too as well, of like actively, as much as we have, actively trying to not accept that, not accept that, their third president was Afro-Mexican, that one of their famous people that like led the revolution, like our what's the dude with the light who said the British were coming? You know what I'm saying? Like
Paul Revere.
We had like, his name was Jose Morales, but even things like that, like famous historical figures finding out that they've been lightened over time in pictures and through art. Like
California was named after a Black Mexican goddess fable story.
Really?
Yeah, it was a queer African Mexican woman who was supposed to be queen of this basically lesbian island, and her name was Khalifa. Yeah. And they named California Baja after her, even though it's like a myth. It's a myth story.
The last, that's interesting. I'm Googling the crap out of that.
I only know a little bit because I've seen it here and there, but I was like, dope, Black, Mexican, queer, down.
Yeah, that's, we just, one, California, every street name, just about, not everyone, but tons of them are in Spanish. But
quite a few, yeah.
The neighborhood of Pio Pico in Los Angeles?
Is it the one where it started, where LA was supposed to have started?
Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was called, but yeah, I know where it is roughly.
That's the guy's name. His name was Pio Pico, and he was the last California governor, and he was the first California governor of the United States. Last for Mexico, first for the United States. And his family, including himself, African Mexican. So it's just like, I find it interesting, and I've been watching a lot of these documentaries of people who live in Los Angeles here, and everywhere in between, that like they seem to have the same struggle, the same, not identity crisis, because I don't feel like that. I understand how people could have that, but the same question. People are, you're not Black enough to be Black, you're not Mexican enough to be Mexican. Like they have that same struggle, and they're from either Oaxaca or they're from wherever in between. Whereas obviously mine was like from a Mexican in Chula Vista and a Black guy in Chula Vista, you know what I mean? But still made the same, it's still the same Afro-Mexican.
Yeah.
And I still experience that same question mark, I guess you would say, that same obstacle from people in my culture of being American, that people would experience from in their own culture being Mexican, which I'm sure, if, Dominicans, Colombians, they don't, Panamanians, they don't deal with that so much. And I don't want to say they don't, but being Black is such a part of like, oh no, like all Panamanians, we have dark and light.
Right.
All Brazilians, we have dark and light. Like it's not a thing about whiteness is still a thing, but like it's not like they have
their slightly more accepted Black population compared to other Latinx.
And that, you said it better than I said it. But it's that's what's been so interesting to me. And that's part of the reason why I want to go and visit Oaxaca. Veracruz has a big one too. And Veracruz has a city named after an African slave who escaped, named Yangu. And he moved along and took villagers and he liberated slaves in Mexico. Which I was like, dude, gotta go see
That's
this.
A story.
They have a statue of this guy. And it's like, dude, like, how's that not a Netflix show? You know what I'm saying? Like,
you know what I'm saying?
So it's been interesting to do that. And I feed on that. But then I also like, and that's, with meeting my biological mom, to be like, where is your family from? And this thing says that you have blood from here. And she's like, but I don't think we're from there. But it's like, I've met another cousin of mine off of this thing in which she lives in like San Jose, and my biological mom doesn't know her. So it's like
people travel, people spread.
Exactly.
We're related to a bunch of people we don't know about.
You think COVID spreads, man? You should see people.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I swear, I've gotten through the ancestry. I've gotten a few messages, and one I think I had hit you up about it. I have a cousin who is probably my father's first cousin biologically. But she was adopted out and raised by people that were like a Black father and a white mother. And she's from my Black side of the family. And we were trying to figure out who her father might have been because of her birth last name. So we figured it had to be her father. But it's starting to look like actually she's probably the child of one of the sisters that got sent away to... Yeah. Like a nunnery, like they, like basically something like that. Like they were sent away for a period of time. And when they came back, there was a baby, but she didn't keep it. So the baby was given to somebody because of drugs and all that kind of stuff. Like, so they sent her away. She had a baby. There's a whole thing.
This is a Lifetime show. Like,
right. It's hella dramatic. And so like, she reached out to me on Ancestry and she's like, we're related, but I'm adopted. So can you help me find my story? And at first I thought she might've been a first cousin. So I was like, oh, if you're a first cousin, you're definitely my uncle so-and-so's kid because he disappears every so often. And when he comes back, there's new babies. Yeah. So like,
just find these babies on the
that's what I'm saying. That's 100% why I did Ancestry, because I'm waiting to find some trophies around the country that I'm related to.
I'm related to Drake. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's basically like, at first I was thinking, if you're my first cousin, this is most likely who your father is. And then as we got to talking more and more, and then I got her connected to a relative of mine who does do all that family tracing stuff. She goes, oh, I think she might be the daughter of so-and-so who was on drugs, got sent away. And when she came back, the baby wasn't with her.
Okay, so there's one.
Yeah, it's a thing.
We need to hit up, Tyler Perry or Will Smith or something, because that, and I feel like my half sister, she had something called The Telling, and it was basically a social worker's notes of all this, like, this is who her mothers were. This is who her parole officer were. Things like that. So like, these are, stories of color, and I'm sure they happen in non-color, I'm absolutely sure.
Yeah.
But, these are stories of color. That's like, you can't make this shit up. Like,
yeah.
You can't. And it's not, I don't want to say culturally, but it's like, it's definitely a product of the environment. You know what I'm saying? If you have people getting split up and like, that's the ultimate, like, whoever sent her away to the nunnery and she came back, I'd be like, what? What?
Yeah. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us probably have those dirty little secret stories where it's relatives that are doing things to people and things like that. I think there's some of that.
There's my brother, he's looking into his, and it's like, it's something that's just like, man, I don't think I wanted to know that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I wanted to know I was related to somebody, you know, like that was like that, you know, and we all, like you said, I'm sure we all have it, but it's like,
without like re-traumatizing or maybe even traumatizing for the first time because you're now getting access to stuff that you didn't know beforehand.
Yeah.
Are you finding that any place that you were hopeful about, now that you know what you know, has shifted your feelings about this experience?
I think I love to hate it about it, but I think my girlfriend, we've had conversations about, and it's made me start to think about, like, I seem to be so open or more open to the idea of like learning my mom's side because I like Latinness and I lean into that. But my girlfriend was kind of proposing the other side of the coin of it. It's like, why don't you feel that same way about your father's side? You know, like, and I think that's not something that it's kind of in lieu, kind of like connected to what you just asked me. It was like, it's not that I found out anything I don't like and I didn't already know, you know, but it's just like, what's holding me back? You know what I mean? Like, I have the control to, like, you know, let this person in or not in, you know what I mean? And keep them at a distance, all that. I just maybe feel like I know what I already need to know, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
But maybe not, you know what I mean? Because I don't know. If I go back, trace it back, certainly I'll find someone who was either a slave or someone who was, how'd they get here, you know, right? Foreign to this land. So that entices me a lot. But it's like, I'm not too sure. I feel weird about being this person that's like, hey, I'm new. I'm this guy's son that was whatever. And I just want to like get to know grandma and then grandma's grandma and like they're, you know, trace it. Like, I think
that's fair though. Like, okay, when you are in this situation that you knew before you found people, you at least knew that there was a drug element involved into why you were adopted out. And you knew that the family who took you had that awareness, but you were their kid. Okay. That's what you knew. So you knew as you were about to look into this, that you might be learning some painful things. Yeah. That was very much a possibility. For that level of defense, that being the actual biological parents and being more curious about the people that came before them makes sense to me, because these are the two people that weren't there for you, that didn't take care of you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that the people that went above them, your grandmothers, your grandfathers and things like that, may not have wanted you if they had known or whatever the circumstance was. You know, I think that it doesn't not make sense to me. I don't know what to say. I also, like, even though I grew up with my parents were teenagers. I was raised by other family members on and off. So my connection to my cultures come to me from my grandmothers or my grandfathers, you know, depending on which side of the family it is. And skipping my parents, it's fine.
I feel like leapfrogging. Yeah. I feel like
like it seems fine. Because other people made the people that made them. So let's find out about them.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just want to know if I should be celebrating Kwanzaa or not. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it's.
Well, I mean, see, there's something you said also too, is like, and you did this on the first time that we spoke when you were on the episode 22, is you had said something about leaning more into, or being sort of pulled more in the direction of your Mexican heritage. And that was before you really fully understood what was it actually? Like Mexican. Okay. But what is that? Is that California Mexican? Is that Mexican? Like, you didn't know until you started digging. Right. So the fact that you were pulling in that direction naturally, I think this is going to sound so goofy, but I promise I feel that this is legit. I feel like in the same way that like your DNA is a mix of all kinds of different things, but if you had a full biological sibling and they took their test might not match up with yours exactly percentage wise, because certain elements kind of in all of our genetics space out differently amongst our siblings. You know, you have, I forget what that chart's called, but you remember like in biology class in school was like 2 capital P's, a big P and a little p, a big P and a little p, and then 2 little p's. And that's sort of how genetics are dispersed across children.
Yep.
I want to say that like on a weird genetic, but somehow cultural level, there's something like that at play too, that would draw you or attract you more to the Mexican side of your heritage, because maybe somehow inside that's a little bit more dominant. This is like the most foo-foo I'm ever going to sound and crazy. But I think this because when I go, I don't have a whole lot of access to my Japanese culture. I have that through my Japanese grandmother and some of my cousins, but I wasn't raised Japanese. And I'm not going to be accepted as Japanese. But if I go to a Buddhist temple for like an Onbon festival or some other kind of festival or something like that, and there's taiko drums playing, my body reacts to that in a way that just feels like there's something so familiar and home about this music that I wasn't even raised around necessarily, but has got in there, and it feeds me, and I feel good about that. And then I looked into my DNA, my African ancestry, not through Ancestry.com, but through African ancestry. And I found the 3 tribes that my patriarchal side derived from. And they're from what is currently Gabon. But then I started looking into those 3 cultures, those 3 tribes. And there was one tribe of the 3 in particular that I felt really attracted to. And the more I was learning about each of those 3, the less I paid attention to 2 of them and the more I dug into one of them. And then I started to Google like music from that particular tribe, and same feeling that I would feel with the taiko drums, I was feeling with that. And look, I had access. I went from having no access to my African heritage to finding 3 tribes that my people come from, to whittling that down to 1 that I'm really interested in learning about. Not that I don't have time or interest in the other cultures, but for some reason, there's more elements to this one that felt more like me, that I think maybe more of them got in me than the other 2, even though I'm from those other 2 as well. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like that pull might not just be like you mentally. I think that might be something inside, deep seated in your genetics that is pulling you more in that direction. And maybe that's informing your quest.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I feel that wholeheartedly, because it's I don't want to say it's unexplainable, but it's definitely hard to explain, because it's like, and the quickest way I can relate it was like, I heard somewhere where we're all born with a family, right? We're all born with our first family, but the luxury of, you know, we get to find people along our journey that become our second family and our third family. And I think those, as being your chosen family, it's like, you know, there's a luxury in that. There's not privilege, but it's, there's a privilege to it. There's a beauty to that. You know what I mean? Like mother and father, that's not necessarily, there's no necessarily, you know, connection, the word blood, you know, blood father, blood mother, but, you know, anybody can be a mother, anybody can be a father is what I'm trying to say. So I think that's cool that, like you said, your body pulls towards that, and, you know, something about it just feels right, you know, and I also think that might be your Black side too, because, you know, Black people, when we hear anything, it's like, you just can't help but move, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the cool part. And, but it's, I think with that ancestry, well, it has to be someone above you, right? Your father has to take it above you, right? So that would be interesting to take if I could get him to take it. But yeah.
Well, yeah. So yeah, on the African ancestry side, if you can get, if not your biological father, if he has male siblings or something like that, that would help that thing. And then I have a female cousin who's going to take the matriarchal side, because like I could only go the patriarchal route because my father is my Black parent. Okay. And so it had to be a male relative. So if not my brother and not my father, because my father is dead, then I reached out to my dad's brother and I had him take it. I paid for it, but I was like, can you spit in this? And he did it so that we could find that out. And then that cousin that is going to do the matriarchal side, she is the daughter of my grandfather's sister.
Oh.
So she's my dad's first cousin.
Oh, wow. Daughter of my grandfather's sister.
Yeah. So she would be like, her mother is my great aunt, but she'll take the matriarchal side because she has a mother from my family.
So, but like, it has to be and this is a dumb question. It has to be an African parent, of course. So
right. So like in your case,
have to be my father. Yeah.
Like you can take it because you're male. So you'll get the patriarchal, because there's something that passes from male to male that doesn't pass from male to female. So even though I do get my blackness from my father, I have something that didn't come down with my dad to me because I'm female, but did go to my brother. But my brother and I can't talk about race and things like that. So I couldn't ask him to do this for me. It's a drama. He's on his journey. Our journeys were separate in terms of the blackness. So not being able to ask my brother, and my dad being dead, I asked the only uncle that I'm in contact with. And it's like a delicate, soft contact. It's like we talk sometimes, but very rarely. And so I just basically hit him up on Facebook and like, could you do this for me, uncle? Like, knowing that the family ain't done shit, like, could you do this thing if I pay for it and just have it sent to your house? And he was like, yeah, I'll do it.
Wow.
And so that's how that happened. But you could take it because you're male. And you would take the patriarchal one, the patrilineal one. But you'd get more information the more up you go. So if you have your black father could take it, or if your grandfather is alive, you would get even more data.
Okay.
But you could still do it. So you're in a position I'm not in.
Okay.
Because you're male, you could do the patrilineal side.
Wow. It's this male privilege.
You know what I'm saying? It's a whole thing. Like there's literally something that on the genetic level, there's literally something that passes from father to son that does not pass from father to daughter. And then on the matrilineal side, male or female, we get it all.
Really?
But it's probably crisper, I think, if you get a female relative to do it. So yeah, it's a whole thing. But I think in your particular case, and I'm not making any judgments on anything, but just from my own feelings about it, like if you felt any weirdness or guilt about wanting to skip your biological parents to go to, I wouldn't feel anything about that because at the end of the day, those are the people that weren't there. Yeah. How, for the purpose of conversation, how do you distinguish your mother who raised you, mom, to biological mother? What do you call her?
Sonia.
By her first name? By her government name?
Yeah. By her name, her government name. That's the name that was given to her at birth.
So how does your mom, the woman who raised you, how does she feel about your journey? I know we talked a little bit about her telling you what she told you and everything. So how does she feel?
I think she's still hesitant. I know she holds on to these feelings of caution because and I wholeheartedly believe it's because she knows more to the story than I do, obviously, so I know that she was going to court up until I was in kindergarten of a custody battle, but not with my biological mom because she'd always just been like, nah, I'm not doing all that, but with my biological dad's side. So I think maybe that's why, but I think she should probably hold that more towards my biological dad's side, not so much on my biological mom's side, but she should hold something else, which would be, I don't know. And I don't want to say anger, but just something which and I only put myself in this position, which is why I'm like, this is how I would feel. I would feel like it's not that you didn't want your kid then, but it's like, if I raised your kid and you did things that, you didn't want your kid, obviously, to health, drugs, while being pregnant, things like that. I would definitely be very cautious with you coming back. You know? And that is where as being in my position, being the kid in this situation, I totally understand. And I think I'm blessed to be able to have that recognition as well as my mom is, having a child that's not, I'm not leaning towards one way or the other, or I guess I am leaning more towards my mom's side, but I'm not leaning towards, you're not my mom, So I get it from her standpoint. And that's why I think it kind of ties back into, just thinking when I get married, how do I make her feel more comfortable? Not only walking me down the aisle, because my dad, that's a different thing. But, if I marry, this girl that I'm with right now, and she speaks mostly just Spanish, and her family only speaks Spanish, I mean, I don't want my mom to feel like, oh, well, they're communicating more with Sonia, my biological mom, than they are with me. They must like her more. It's like, no, it's like
access.
It's access.
Language, yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I'm think about like, well, do I even want to, should I even invite her to my wedding? My biological mom.
I see.
Because I feel
that makes sense.
It's such a journey. And like, she didn't help me graduate college. She didn't help me, start my first bank account, didn't help me, didn't pick me up after multiple failures, multiple failures, which I think I give my adoptive mom, like, that's what people need is they need to, they need other shit too, but like, they really need an environment where you can feel free to fail and not like, hey, remember that time you fucked me on? Like, it's
right.
No, like, I want to be able to fall flat. And then one time I'm not going to fail, and that's going to be, and I think as a parent, that's probably really hard to watch,
right.
But to give someone that freedom to do that and not feel like you better get a degree in a career and the degree that you got that, in the field that you worked so hard in. If you don't, that's a failure. And I think that's probably in every culture, but like, I feel like if there's any culture that's going to be like, there's going to be an opposite side to that. Like, hey, chase your dreams, even if you fail. I think that's where America, we got pretty lucky. It's like, it's not like you're going to bring shame to your family, like in Japan. If you, if you spit on the ground or something.
Those ancestors just sitting there and that's waiting for you to fail.
Exactly. Like, and I feel like that's like such a, there's cultural difference, but that's such such something that's so interesting about it. It's like all these other cultures that can trace their culture back, whereas America, we're so young and I don't know. We need, imagine, this is my dream, this is my personal dream, but if I think the population of the United States is, I don't know if it's 400 million or whatever it may be, right? But could you imagine what would happen if somehow we gave $1 million or $500,000 to every whatever stimulus package person, right? Like, and I say this only because, that would be dope for everybody to get it. But how do you not look back on the people who come from slave ancestry? And like, that's the part that pulls me to figure out my dad's side. It's like, I want to be able to trace like, from where did my blackness come from? What part of Africa did they go into? Because they didn't go, damn sure they didn't go all the way in. They strictly along these lines. And it's, that's what really pulls me to it. Like, where did they come on the East Coast? I went to a plantation in Jacksonville and it was just like, it felt so surreal. Like, oh my God, like, people slept here, like slaves, like people that looked like me, like because they looked like me was the only reason why they were, and it's, I got this book that I can't put down and I'm such a slow reader. So it's an enjoyable experience. It's called, a young woman that I love and I need to speak to her. She's one of the people that I need to speak to before she gets too old or I die or she dies, whatever. Her name's Dr. Joy DeGruy. And she wrote a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And it is incredible. Like, it was incredible. It is incredible. So, but it talks about like just how strategically woven, racism is. And it's like, how do you think that, PTSD, how people get that from seeing their friends get killed in the military, right? And that's like, that can happen in 3 years. That can happen in a year. That can happen in 10 years. So what's the degree of traumatic slave that happened to slaves, for 400 years, 300 years? And just because slavery ended doesn't mean slavery ended, like, so, and it's like proof that like, these things, seeing your friend die and stuff like that, or whatever, trauma changes your genetic, it can change your genetic, like your genes. So looking at that, like, and just how does that not affect Black people? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
I mean, besides the genetic part that has got to have some sort of impact. I mean, if depression and anxiety is something you can pass down through genetics, then absolutely trauma should be one of those things, right? So besides even that, the fact that because you don't heal like that after experiencing something traumatic, even if you're trying your damnness when you're raising your kids, you're going to be passing this stuff on. You're going to be passing it on physically, and you're going to be passing it on mentally and emotionally and in the way that they're reared. So by the time they're doing it to their kids and so on and so on. So we sit like, and also some of us come from cultures who have this built into the culture, like with Japanese, your ancestors, everything you do determines the fate of your ancestors. Like those people live their life already. Now I'm responsible for them too. Yeah. Like the weight of that is too much for people. Pressure. That's pressure. And if you have that potentially also on the fact that we descend from African enslavement too, like this is a lot to be stacking up on our little bones that are made out of this little teeny tiny white stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like it's too much for us to not understand. And I think what's happening now that I hadn't seen in all of my 43 years is that people seem to be more apt to looking into that kind of stuff now and actually thinking there might be something to it. I mean, for most of my life, if you were depressed, you just needed Jesus, and now like, it's like, oh, actually maybe mental health is a real thing that we need to look into, so we're getting there. It takes these long periods of time, but I hope that, even in the next 20 years of my life, I start to see people go from, you're depressed, you need Jesus, to actually, no, you need therapy. And, let's try to do this work, to actual reintroduction of healthy behaviors and things like that. So that we're a little bit more accepting of when people do struggle with this, with mental health and things like that. And trauma that is beyond just what's easily targeted. If you've been through a traumatic experience, it's really easy to target that specific traumatic experience. But if you're dealing with the traumatic experiences of the people who came before you, how do you target that?
Yeah.
So hopefully we start doing work like that allows us to get into that. And as we do dig more into our family histories, maybe we're discovering some of those things that we wouldn't have had access to. As you have been, I think at this point, it's safe to say over a year into this journey of getting to know the people you came from. What has that done for your personal investigation into your cultural identity?
That's a good one. I think for my cultural identity, I'm much more, and I've always been proud, but like, I'm much more like proud to talk about it, because it's like, there's proof, but it's like, there's proof and there's other people that experience the same thing. And I'm sure that, me being Black and Mexican living here in San Diego, which amazingly, San Diego has, our influence. That's why I think the Chargers didn't work. It's like, they didn't lean into that whole Hispanic pride thing. Like, you got to lean into that, San Diego. Like, that was your market. So like, San Diego has that kind of, Los Angeles has it too, right? Because we're all used to be Mexico, but we have it more than like Arizona, right? Well, maybe Arizona, but we have it more than Oregon, right? We have it more than Montana.
Sure, yeah.
And things like that. So like, me being African Mexican here, and even I can say that because it's like, even for Black people, like, they're like, you're not full Black, you know what I'm saying? So like, even then, where it's, it's like, you would think of, Black people are pretty accepting, and you think that, oh no, it doesn't matter. It's like, you have dark skin, you're one of us. I'm sure people, Afro-Mexicans in Mexico, have a similar experience, and I have one of theirs, because it's like, that's what I don't know, you're never just not, you're not, it's not sufficient. You know what I mean? You're mixed, it's not sufficient. I feel like that has really, I've leaned into being proud of that, being into being like, what this combination has become. And like, and it's something beautiful. And I say that in this, and I can put it in this example of like, in 2010, when the earthquake happened in Haiti, a lot of them moved out, and they moved to Brazil, couldn't stay in Brazil. So they've traveled, what is that? That's Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Guatemala, the countries that they traveled to make it to the US. And they guess where they got held up? At the border in Tijuana. So close. But there's the number I heard last in 2018 or 2019 was 3,000 were just living in Tijuana, Haitians. So that's something that kind of interests me, is that I look forward to that, dude, that immersion, that fusion, that connection of Haitian cuisine, Mexican cuisine, of Haitian culture, Mexican culture, if it's done not right, but if it's done, in an open, accepting way.
Like a welcoming, yeah.
Which I think Tijuana will do if the Haitians will do as well their part, which is like, just come in and be a part of the community, productive. We need people who can work and give to the community and help draw people in, because Tijuana is transient, so a lot of people come and go. So
that's what's actually really interesting, I think, about the immigrant experience in general, whether it's a refugee level immigration or if it's like by choice, is that people, they go to somewhere else hoping for safety or prosperity or whatever the thing is, but they also are trying to hope to still be where they were from.
Yeah.
And a lot of that happens to a lot of cultures. So then you end up having this weird divide between your children being more Americanized than you are and things like that and whatever, right? In Japanese culture, it's a little different, because when they leave, they assimilate to the best of their ability. Like, obviously faces and things like that are gonna still tell people that they're not from here, whatever that is. But they're going to not teach their kids the language, which is a struggle that a lot of us mixed Japanese feel. You're not always going to have a whole lot of cultural events unless you live in a pocket community, which even in these pocket communities, like I live in one of the smaller Japanese neighborhoods in LA, and even I can't break in. Like, I can go to the shops and all that other kind of stuff, but I can't be a part of the community because they're trying to be American. They're trying to get rid of the past and be American. So as a mixed Japanese trying to get in there, it's really tough because they're trying to give up the thing I'm trying to get. But other immigrant communities don't do that. They stay within their communities. They speak the language. They keep the culture going and stuff like that as much as they can. And it's really because the kids are being raised around other people that they start to change. And I wonder, as like the Haitians that are in Tijuana, if they are trying to stay Haitian while they're there, or stay Haitian if they get here, what does that mean for their culture, their population, if they don't integrate here? That means that America is going to continue to beat them down until they no longer come from where they come from.
I think I've seen that from not only friends that I have that are, in cases, different races, but in this case, I've had friends that are Mexican that are like, oh, I speak Spanish at home. Like when I leave home, I'm with my friends. I don't want to speak Spanish. Like if they don't speak Spanish, I don't want to speak Spanish. Like I want to speak, English. And then even that generation, that generation, it's probably my brother's generation, which is like 35 right now. So then he has siblings that are 10 years younger, and they're like wholeheartedly like, no. English.
Only English.
I can speak Spanish because my mom speaks Spanish, my parents speak Spanish, but like I'm like the leader, which is not bad at all. Don't get me wrong, not at all amazing accomplishment. But like I'm the head of my student org, and it's like it's not a cultural student org, which is not a problem, but it's academic, so it's all English, so it's like, which is not bad, and that's, I think parents and immigrants, which I have no experience, but I imagine that's probably the biggest struggle. It's like, I want to give you the best life. And if that's out of our home country, which no immigrant wants to leave their home country if they don't have to, in the sense of if it wasn't hard to find job, if it wasn't hard to, right? If they didn't have to, right? Because if you're
not escaping something.
Exactly. Like I love it, or that's, imagine what they would be saying is I love my home country. But so yeah, when they move, they come here, where it's like part of me just being in my lived experience is I get more and more like cringing of the idea of assimilating. Because
me too.
I feel like not only do you see it and, people, you're throwing away your culture, which it sucks. Cause like, man, what's American culture? We don't even have a interesting one.
It's a collection of all the people that came here.
We still your best. Yeah. So we don't, we asked for your humbled and, you're humbled and sickened on the Statue of Liberty, but we want your best.
We want your food. We want your dance. We want your clothes,
So it's like, I get it. Cause like I said, my friend who's, my brother's generation, his parents were like, I'm sure, we're like, yes, better life, but at the same time, like, but you're still Mexican. I mean? Like that, we can't take that out of you, So I wholeheartedly see that in the food that they eat, their culture, their practices, the home language and all that. But I think it's probably a slippery slope for a parent that's like, they, you know, as I realized, as, you know, kids, just working around kids, like you see how, like, how easy it is for them to slip into like social, just being, I don't want to say socialist, but like being socially American, like, you know, like, I want the newest phone.
It's powerful. The peer pressure and the fact that kids are so brutal, if you are different from them, that like it's going to force kids to want to not embrace where they come from and things like that. And what I hate about that is, like, for people like you and I is that we lose that connection point that would allow us to have some history. So now we have to spend so much of our adult life trying to piece it together, which was going to make us feel not enough of. You know, I think what needs to be reframed about the mixed experience is that we're not less than of either thing, but we're double or we're triple or whatever it is, right?
They always ask me, like, what was like, how do you feel? And my first reaction was a joke, but like now Jesse, you're just so smart. No, they're like, what's better? You're Black and Mexican. I was like, bro, it's like the best of both worlds. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can hop a fence like that. You know what I'm saying? like I can, you know, just like do the things that Blacks do well, which is everything, which is interesting. And then Latinos are there's so much passion, even when they're saying the things that they love about you, right? Like, it's just so much. My girlfriend and I laughed about her because, like, she was doing a Zoom call with her cousins and her coworkers, 2 separate ones. And at times, like, I was just like, girl, it's like 9:00 at night. I feel like we're being too loud, because she was just laughing and like, like stop. Like, it's just like, no, but that's all love. That's all love. That's all passion. Like, you know, so it's like, that's the best of both worlds. Like, you can't just take what you see on the news, which is never good. Like, Black people are only portrayed as robbing, stealing, sexually abusing, killing, whatever. Right. And Latinos are, which American, like, if you come here in San Diego, if you're Ecuadorian, Nicaraguan, Panamanian, first thing is going to say you're either Black or you're Mexican. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm Salvadorian, but you look Mexican. So, you know, it's like,
I've literally been asked what kind of Mexican I am, meaning that they think Puerto Rican is a kind of Mexican. Like anybody that speaks Spanish is a kind of Mexican. And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not Latinx at all, but also that's not a thing. That's not how you ask that question. I'm always amazed. Like, some people are like, that could be really offensive for someone to say that, but you have the same reaction to you. It's like, that is incredible how stupid that you sound. It's like so exquisitely racist that you just like, you don't know.
I don't even get angry mad. I don't even
or
get mad.
Like just like you just don't know where your feelings are supposed to be in that moment.
So deep, so deeply intrinsically racist. Like, I'm actually kind of like want to give you a round of applause because, like,
you know, like you're just like, how do you get through this world being that level? Like, how tight and small does your community and your echo chamber need to be for you to just like, you know, level
to not skip a beat, to just like, you said that before, haven't you? Yeah.
Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Charmaine Fury. Music is by David Bogan the One. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. If you'd like to become a sponsor of Militantly Mixed, please go to patreon.com/militantly mixed for monthly sponsorship or paypal.me/militantly mixed for a one-time only donation. And if you like what you hear on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to be your mixed ass self. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.